Welcome to Launched. I'm Charlie Chapman, and this is the annual Christmas special with the one and only Jordan Morgan. Jordan, welcome back to this very continually running show that we have here.
I do one podcast a year and I make it count.
I'm getting close to being in the same category. I think our Christmas special from last year was like 3 episodes ago, approximately.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just address that right off the bat here. We're not dead yet. Launched. It's still alive. Obviously, we're always going to do the Christmas special till the day we die. Jordan has signed a contract for that.
Marked in blood.
Yeah, marked in blood. I have nothing to announce, but as they say in the biz, things are in motion. We're still in the same mode we were before. Don't expect regular episodes right now, but I am trying to get some pieces in place so I can maybe get launched back into some sort of regular cadence, but we're not there yet.
TBD.
Exactly. So for anybody who's somehow listening to this and doesn't already know what's going on, I guess if this show gets going again in earnest, maybe they'll be going through the back catalog and be confused when they listen to this. This is the annual Christmas special with Jordan Morgan. We started this, I think, the first year that I started this show, which at this point is like 5 years ago, which I guess episode was then 4 years ago. And this is our opportunity, unlike a normal episode that's about everybody else. This is kind of the episode where we get to sit and talk about our feelings as indie app developers in the App Store world, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is year number 4. We've graduated. I mean, this Christmas special is graduating high school this year. That's crazy.
Graduating? Well, so our first year was our freshman year of high school.
Freshman year. So
like, what year did you go to high school? I don't know what it's like down in Southern Missouri.
Didn't you graduate high school in 4th grade? Or I guess 3rd grade, kindergarten? Yeah, 2021. That's the one that I have on my website. That was the first one.
Yeah. I guess to sort of kick off the conversation then, there's been some pretty major changes in your life, definitely in the last year. So technically, I think you knew that this was happening, but you hadn't announced it publicly, that you went from a real job as an iOS developer to joining the dark side that I had joined last year of developer advocacy, where we sort of fake being iOS developers. Do you want to tell the people, one, what did you do? And then how's that been going?
I mean, if there's any career ambition I've always had, it's to have a fake job. So I'm very #blessed for it. Yeah, no, let's see. So the long story short is I'd been in my previous job, Buffer, I think I was coming up on 9 or 10 years. I can't even remember at this point. But, you stay at a company a while, kind of start wondering what you want to do next. And I kind of was getting to that point. I think a lot of software engineers go through it where you just kind of get a little jaded, I want to say. Not so much with the company, but just the daily grind of fixing bugs, trying to meet deadlines, get projects out, being the engineer, capital E. And so kind of was starting to feel the brunt of doing that for so long. And when I kind of was, chatting through this with my wife, and, I think even in the group chat, it's always meta having this podcast, because like everything that I'm saying, I've already said to you, but it's like, what's next? What do I want to do? And I think I actually talked to David about the position that you have before you had applied for it, like, months ago. And at the time I was
David, the growth advocate at RevenueCat.
Yeah, RevenueCat. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm all right at Buffer right now. And, change is so big and scary when you've been at a company that long, right? You're so comfortable, you know how things go. For better or for worse, what each day is going to look like. And so switching that up was like a huge leap of faith for me, especially since, my wife Jansen stays home. I have 3 kids, so any career change I kind of want to feel good about. But one point my wife made was like, well, you kind of want to feel good about being happy about what you do every day. And you don't really seem very happy doing what you do every day. And again, I still talk to tons of people from Buffer. That's not a slight at Buffer at all. They treated me very well for a long time. It was just more
too late. You just burn that bridge down.
Yeah,
you might as well just slander them for the rest of the show.
Exactly. It's a Buffer burn fest the rest of the way. No, but it was really clear that like I needed to change a pace. And I remember I reached out to 3 companies. It was when I decided like mentally, like, yes, I'm going to look for something else, kind of see how it feels. It was, I DM'd Josh from Emerge Tools. I talked to Browser Company, got pretty far in the process with them, but then realized I was just going to be jumping straight back into like some pretty hardcore engineering. And then I DM'd Jake, and Jake was hilarious to chat with.
Jake, the CEO or founder. I don't know what his position
this is that whole, everything I'm talking about.
This is where me being a professional podcaster who does this regularly all the time, I bring my expertise to the fold.
Exactly. So Jake is the CEO at Superwall, where I work. I've known Jake for a long time. And when I DM'd him, he was just like, heck yeah, man, let's do it. This is very nonchalant. Like, let's go. Before I even knew what I was doing, and the thing that sold me was he said, like, I want you, like, if you come here, I just want you to make Swiftjective-C, which is my personal blog website. I just want you to do that for us. And I was like, that sounds phenomenal. I'm almost at a year in, I think, in January 15th. But like the thought of writing, for lack of a better word, content for a company and being paid for it, as opposed to like really, in the trenches with engineering, just sounded like exactly kind of what I needed at the time.
Coming up for air.
And I got to say, coming up for air. And I got to say, like, it does feel fantastic, because I'm sure and we can talk about the intricacies of like how we both do things in the same role, but it's such a different field than engineering, because the way that I explain it is like you have to have been an engineer to kind of do the things that me and you do. Like it would be hard to jump straight into a developer relations role in the way that we have them at our companies. I'm sure there's a huge span of what those roles look like. But for me, it's like if I don't know how to program or read docs or write docs for that matter, then like I can't really do this. So there's this little niche of people that I think are emerging in the industry right now that have been engineers for a long time, but also have those written communication skills. And like that's a good mix for a developer advocate. And that's kind of what the thought process behind getting to that point. But I got to say, I love the job. I love the role. It's not that it doesn't come without its own set of pressures and stress, but they are definitely different. Like not feeling the weight of a deadline. Like if I could tangibly measure my stress this past year, it just went like it nosedived down. It's like, oh man, I hope I can get this article done, instead of being like, I just shipped a bug that, screwed up 50,000 users, workflow.
Yeah.
The stresses are different, and it's what I need, because like, as we just kind of, it's really surreal that we have these talks every year. I mean, because we're just getting older and older, man. I mean,
there's more gray hair every episode.
Hair, and it's just like my kids, they're getting older, and I care more about spending time with them, and being a better dad, all those things. And it really just got to the tipping point for me. And I think a lot of people hit this in this career, where it's like, man, I'm stressed out a lot, and I kind of bring it home. I'm a little bit more quiet. I'm just trying to decompress and get back into dad mode. And to have a job where like you don't feel that anymore makes a huge difference. And I got to say, I love the small feel too. At Superwall, there's, I think, 8 of us. And for anybody listening, me and Charlie were joking about this. Yes, we are sworn enemies working at rival huge tech companies. And our sole mission is to destroy the other one. So as I mentioned to Charlie, my only reason for doing this is to bring back Intel, of course, and try and obliterate Revenue Cat once this posts, obviously. So,
Superwall is a great partner of Revenue Cat. We're happy for people
thing,
to use.
So there's all these mangled, tangled webs we weave, I guess.
I think that's, I may have mentioned this last year, because I'm assuming we talked about this last year. I only listened to like half of the episode because I've been busy. But
Traitor.
One of the weird things about this job for me, and I assume it's somewhat similar for you, is like I used to maintain a really strict like curtain between my jobby job and all the indie and online stuff that I did. And all of that just got completely obliterated doing this dev advocate thing. Because part of the reason I was hired, and it sounds like part of the reason you were hired, is to bring that person into the company. Like that's literally the point. So you're supposed to talk about you and be you publicly as an employee of that company. And that has been kind of interesting. And it's something I think I would have been uncomfortable with before, but I'm used to it now, and it doesn't really make me uncomfortable at all.
You make a great point, because that's one of the things that I like about the role is, like, before, if I found like an interesting new API, because we're just super weird nerds and pour over Xcode documentation for fun and entertainment like normal people.
Speak for yourself.
Like when I find those things, like my urge is like maybe to like just tweet it out and be like, oh, has anyone checked this out? But like I think in like traditional roles or other jobs or like tech companies that are also online, you're like, I don't really want to tweet this right now because like I'm on my quote unquote work hours. There's all these optics involved. Whereas now that's like, it's so fun because that's like my job. The more that I be myself and share like even side projects, the things that I'm working on, the things that I write about, it's truly like a symbiotic relationship where it just helps me because I enjoy it. And it also helps Superwall because, like you said, you kind of personify the company in a way where you can associate yourself freely with the people that you're a developer advocate for. And that's why, like, I feel like this job role was really like kind of made for me at this point in my life, because I just want to write. I want to share stuff. I love sharing stuff. I always have. I've been on this podcast for years now saying that. And I feel like we both found a job that like pays us to do that. And it's that old adage, that corny phrase you hear like all the job fairs when you're in high school, college. It's like, hey, find something you love and you never work a day in your life. And you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, but you kind of come back around and it's like, oh shoot, like there is some truth to that. The more you enjoy your job, who knew, the better. Hey, little Moosey.
Yeah,
I see him popping up there. He's got.
I was about to say, I don't. We're attempting to do this on video. So assuming this is on video, you will apparently see my dog just pop his head into frame as he just did to get my attention. I feel like Paul Hudson right now. You might be able to hear him just going to town on a bone over there too.
Hey, that's all right.
He's been very quiet all day till
let him cook.
Moment I hit record. Yeah, let him cook. Something that I think is interesting about what we've both done in the last year and a half with this sort of job switch is I feel like we sort of personified a thing that the CTO at this company that I first internshiped with, they were a like chemical like reselling company for scientists. It was not like a tech job at all.
Right.
And they didn't know what to do with interns. I was there for like kind of a weird reason. And every once in a while he would like take me into his office and like give me advice, but it was like really generic. And I remember him telling me, he's like, you should go into chemical engineering. He's like, because if you can do chemical engineering and computer science, you're worth your weight in gold. Like you're the most valuable person ever. And I was like, I have no interest in chemical engineering. So that was not something that I pursued, but that for whatever reason that stuck with me. And I've heard versions of that my whole career, which is if you are really into something else outside of whatever it is your main job is, most people listening to this probably software development or whatever, and you are also into something else, then those two combined make for a very unique set of skills that there's probably not a lot of people who also do.
100%.
And both of us are weird in that we're nerdy developer types, but we also like the sort of content creation side of things. We like talking to people. And I think we both do this developer advocate job extremely differently, which I think we should talk about here in a second. But like in both cases, we found a role based on all this extra side work that we've been doing for forever, where we could sort of leverage that to combine the very real skill of like decade plus of software engineering experience with the thing we're passionate about, and then found a job that sort of combined those two.
Yeah.
But you have to have both.
Exactly.
It's not like we're just doing the thing that we're passionate about. It's like we're bringing along, like, I do think there's a lot of people that want to go into like this dev advocate thing right away out of school. And there's probably places you can do that with. But I think for both of what we're doing, we're the only ones at our company. And like, you really have to have that full roundedness of all that engineering experience and be passionate about the actual
for sure
content side of the house, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, you're writing stuff for people like you and me, who are developers for a long time. So, like, if you don't know how to speak to them, relate to them, or know what their needs are, it's hard to do this job. But you are right about like kind of how those things converge together and how it just, there's that little spurt of sunshine that starts to peek through when you kind of get in that role that feels really right. And I remember like the first week that I started at Superwall, it was something with payment links and Apple where they air quote allowed external payment links. Do you remember that? Where like there's that crazy scary modal that you had to show. Like it was like they did, but they really didn't. EU. Yeah. And I remember Jake was like, "Hey, can you write something about that?" And it was weird. And I remember texting Jan and I was like, "I can't believe I'm like getting paid to do this right now." Because that was like my first week. Yeah, and I was so used to like, grinding it out on code or whatever it was. And I'm like, I'm writing a blog post and being paid like a tech salary for it. Like it feels like cheating, It's crazy.
That is how I feel every time I open After Effects at work.
Oh my gosh,
and to people in the like at Revenue Cat, they're like, it's like I'm going above and beyond. And to me, I'm like, anytime I've ever done something like that at regular work, it was like me stealing time away. Like I'd feel guilty and I'm rushing through it. And it's kind of incredible being able to do a thing that you actively love doing. And we're not even talking about being an indie developer is also part of this job. It's kind of important that we still understand that world. And that's actually something I was going to ask you about too, is like, because again, this whole episode is very introspective. Me and you are both conservative people, not politically meaning. I just mean like
a political podcast. Let's pivot. Let's go.
We're a hard pivot.
Let's really
welcome to 2024. But like, we overthink most things.
Every day.
To both of us, we did a career change with this, right? Something I've actively thought about a lot, both before and since, and I still think about frequently, is like this, like you just said a second ago, we have to understand the development world in order to do our jobs well. But we're no longer living day to day in the engineering world. We're not, submitting PRs and doing code reviews and all of that stuff. Does that worry you ever? Like, are you concerned about like not burning out, but like losing touch with the people that we're supposed to be talking to because that's not the world that we live in?
It doesn't for me at all. And the reason why is I think I have an even better balance of that now because one, and this is maybe a result of working at such a small employee-based small company, is that I still do engineering stuff quite a bit. Like, we're making a client app right now, and I've done almost all the work on that. And we added RSS. I haven't tweeted about it because I still need to fix some tweaks, but it is actually live in prod. And like, so I got to get my hands dirty with React and Next.js, which I'd never done ever, to kind of get the RSS feed working. So there's these little pockets of engineering that I can go and like seek out to do. So even at my day job, when you take the indie side out of it, which we'll get to, I still code quite often. And I love that. And that's the thing about developer advocacy is I think it's so different, I think, everywhere. That's the sense that I'm getting, because I'm sure there's roles at like Apple, a huge, established company, where you would never do that. But I kind of like, my role almost changes every week. Like some weeks I'm only writing documentation. Some weeks I'm making YouTube videos. Some weeks I'll dip in on some engineering work. Some weeks I'll just hammer the support inbox and spend a lot of my time there. So it always kind of varies. And then if there's a big release coming out, I want to get a blog post for it, things of that nature. But no, in my case, I don't, because I have the luxury of still trying to code if I want to code in the role.
Yeah, that last point is something I found immediately too. Like whenever I switched over, I did the thing I try to always do, which is be way too extra and read literally everything there is to read about what is being a developer advocate. And almost immediately I learned it's a meaningless word and everybody does something different and who knows?
1000%. I didn't read any of that. I was like, I'm just going to wing it.
I remember when you first told me that you were switching over to this role, I was excited because my first thought was like, in the whatever year it had been that I'd been doing it, I was like, I have never found somebody who actually does exactly what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've met other developer advocates, but it's like the moment I start talking to them, I realize, oh, they're doing pretty much a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But then you started, and then it's like, you're essentially doing your own totally different thing as well. Like there's of course overlap
For sure.
but it still feels like we're operating our own just totally different thing.
It is, yeah. And that was one thing I was told is Jake said, like, there's no manager for this. Like, you're just going to make it up as you go, you know? And I feel like that's really a great way to describe developer advocacy because, you know, trying to help out developers with your product or company, it just looks so different all the time. I mean, sometimes it's maybe I need a new video over this certain feature. And that's why I like kind of going all over the place because like some of the videos I do on our YouTube channel, they're a result of me like helping out on support. And I'm like, all right, people are having a lot of issues with this particular part. If I can just do like a 3-minute video explaining it, then I can just, there you go. Here's a video, problem solved. Yeah. And I love that part of it. And speaking of videos, I always joke like with Jake, and then when I saw your CTO on WWDC, I joked about your video production skills too. I was like, when I started at Superwall, I told Jake right away, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to be able to match Charlie's whiz-bang, cool intros and top-notch quality. So let's just make sure we're good there and understand that, you know. I can't do his After Effects mumbo jumbo.
See, that was my worry in the opposite direction. I'm like, Jordan's going to come in here and show everybody what like a good writer actually looks like. And
we just need to.
I'm not going to be able to compete.
Yeah, we need to just merge our powers because you know writing has always been my strong suit, and I love writing, and I'm starting to enjoy video more. But like even before this, I was not even joking. This was serious. Right before we recorded, I'm like, hey, I got this new DJI mic. There's knobs on it. I don't know what any of this means. So like my audio sucks, you know, so like that whole world is still really new to me. And I've picked up a little bit over time to try and make things a little bit better. But like just, that's such a different skill set that you really have to kind of develop. And I think, did you do multimedia stuff in college as well? Or is this just like something you always enjoyed and just kind of taught yourself along the way?
I've always done it like, as a hobby side project. Not consulting, but like I would do projects for churches and local ad agencies and stuff.
So it's been a strength of yours for.
So yeah. This is not something I just decided to pick up and figure out. It's like a birthday present I got in college was After Effects, and that was one of the most. That's probably still the greatest, not birthday, Christmas gift I've ever gotten in my life. It was just like unbelievable to me that I had access to this thing that I'd been watching tutorials about, even though I didn't have access to it.
My version of After Effects is choosing a default animation in CapCut to show the Superwall logo. That's about like as far as my skills go with that stuff. But it is fun. I really do enjoy it. And YouTube gives you such a dopamine hit. Like, I feel so accomplished anytime I upload a video, you know, I'm like, there it is. You know, I think that's the developer advocate version of like shipping a new feature or something. It's like when I get a blog post out
100%.
Or a new feature. And that's actually another good thing I actually wanted to bring up with you. It's like one thing that was tough for me in the beginning is feeling like you didn't have this like tangible, deliverable stuff that you did throughout the week. Like we'll have the stand up on Monday and we'll all go through what we did. And I'm used to being like, yes, this thing is on track, or these bugs were fixed.
Yeah.
Or I researched that. Whereas now your output is a lot different. It's like I made the demo project for this blog post that's going out. You know, it's really in depth. It's good. You know, it's a foundation I can use going forward. But that can take like your whole week. You know, you could be making a demo project all week. And if you have things like daily check-ins or something like that, you know, at first you're like a little self-conscious, like, all right, well, I was still working on, you know, a demo project, but it's like a mindset set shift that you have to have that takes a little bit. And there was never any external pressure or anything, but in your own like internalized pressure, it's very weird. That was the biggest thing I think for me that it took to getting used to in a developer advocate role. Is like just how your output is not code anymore. And like to turn that part of your brain off takes it took me months to kind of get that through my head.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same because what I've learned quickly was like one of the things I was better at is these big, hence the name of the show, I guess, launches. Like,
Yeah.
very quickly, I was pretty like deeply in bed with the product team and the big launches that we do, creating content for them, and that was like really easy for me. But I'm not very fast at writing and the sort of more like not generic, but like evergreen content that's not related to a specific product feature or something.
Like just the weekly blog post kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And we would have these, these strings of time where a bunch of teams were all hitting at the same time. And so a bunch of products were launching, and it's like my world would be crazy. And I'm like pumping out all these videos and I'd feel super productive. And then it would be this lull period while everybody's actually building things. And all of a sudden I would just feel like I'm preparing a lot. I'm building a bunch of projects internally. I'm sending bug reports like, hey, this doesn't seem to work right, whatever. I'm meeting with customers to learn about problems that they're having, whatever. But it was like, whoa, where's all this like output? And suddenly I would feel super like, uh-oh, they're going to find out. They're finally going to realize I don't know what I'm doing.
Cat's out of the bag. Developer advocate is fake.
Exactly. And then, there'd be a new slew of features that would come. And eventually I learned to like be more okay with those lull periods.
For sure.
Because what I would try and do is focus on getting quick wins. But then I wouldn't be as prepared for when the slurry of new stuff came, because I was just out of the loop on everything. And so being in the loop, whether that's internally within my company is like bigger. And so there's lots of teams, there's a lot of things just happening, and it doesn't get pushed to you. You have to sort of seek it all out.
I feel that too, even at our size.
Yeah. And being in the loop online, which sounds weird. I remember whenever I first was in a meeting and one of our other people, actually, I think it was David, our growth advocate, said something about like, it's weird, but like part of my job is just DMing people on Twitter. And I would be like, yeah, I say that too. And now I'm like, it's legitimately like, it's crazy how often, we'll be like, hey, does anybody know anybody at XYZ company in Hong Kong? And it's like, oh yeah, I know like 3 people over there. And it's like, that didn't come for free. That took a lot of me being aggressively like meeting people, talking to people, maintaining relationships, which to be honest, this goes back to I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. That's what I like to do anyway. But it is like a part of the job. And sometimes it can be really time consuming, but then when it pays off, you are like, okay, that was worth it. Even though that was 10 minutes of my time, 30 times over the last 2 years or whatever, that was all worth it now once you actually, get the payoff. But the payoff is like so down the line that it's hard. Yeah, it's very different than normal software development.
And you do quite a few conferences too. That's something I haven't done in the role yet, is like, we go to Deep Dish Swift, the best world-renowned conference that there is on the planet. And that's it. I've been there, and that was funny because that was my first time like working a booth at a conference, like actually being, I don't know, for lack of a better term,
it's very different.
Yeah, and people kind of shy, they mosey up there a little bit, and you're like, hey, like, you want to talk about Superwall or things of that nature. And that was another, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this moment too. Like going to a conference that I would pay to just go to on my own, anyways. And I don't know, I think what we found out is if you're just social lunatics who love programming, then maybe developer advocacy is a good career choice for you.
Yeah. It's a weird, I do think it's a weird job, and it's so specialized. Because to do it, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe our two, like we said, our two jobs are unique.
No, I'd say that all the time. I don't think there's a huge overlap of people that could do it.
Yeah. And like, I don't think I could transition to being a developer advocate at Google unless it was about, well, I couldn't at all because it's like iOS, but like, it's like, yeah, like I have this skill set of like making videos and writing blogs and stuff now, but like what really makes, I think, us to make sense for these roles is like, we're indie devs who know and implemented subscriptions into our app already, and that's a thing that we're interested in, passionate about, and creating content about anyway. And it really is, it's less about like, I don't know, I guess if you heard about this and you were like, man, that sounds like a career opportunity for me, it's like, what would my advice be to do it? It's like, well, first spend a decade doing the engineering work, and then, you know what I mean? It's like, but I do think at like a bigger company where they have big teams, there is a lot more people that are specialized at.
Yeah, like Apple has someone that just writes docs and just does, videos or just does this. Whereas me and you, we're just kind of doing all of those things.
We're doing bad versions of all of the things.
Yeah, we're what is it, the term, master of none, but kind of okay at all of it. So, I mean, that's kind of how you have to be with developer advocacy.
Yeah. I do say a lot, like, I feel like I get to do a cheating version of like almost every role at the company. Like,
that's a good way to put it.
Like I'm sure you get this too. I get a lot of DMs from people for customer support things. It's like, oh, I get to like put on my customer support hat and like, oh, I'm helping you out with this thing. But the moment it gets too hard for me, or I'm busy and I don't want to do it right now or whatever, I can be like, yeah, sorry, man. Like, let me send you over to our actual customer support team, and then they deal with it. Same with like customer calls. I get to go on customer calls all the time, or potential customer calls. But then it's like, but I'm not actually in sales, so I don't have to like actually do the hard part of that job.
Yeah, 100%.
And like engineering, it's like, I can like submit a PR here and there, but it's like, but nobody's expecting me to. Anytime I do it, it's like, oh, thank you for doing some extra work for us.
Above and beyond, yeah.
So it's like everything I do is like a cheap cheating version of all these different hats, which we've talked about, I think, on the show, is part of what we liked about indie development. Is we like wearing all the hats. We like learning about marketing and learning about customer support and learning about all of these things. And in the indie context, you are fully responsible for it, but it's at least smaller in scale.
Yeah. And you get to learn so much that you actually want to learn. Like, you're going to learn at a job no matter whether you want to or not, no matter the vocation or role that you have. It's just part of working somewhere. But like, one thing that really appealed to me with Superwall is like, like Jake especially, he's built an app and like kind of bootstrapped one on its own that did, like several million in revenue. And along the way, he needed something like Superwall, which is, if I remember correctly, kind of how the company started at the time. But like, those are the things that I wanted to learn, because like I had apps for years, but none of them like made enough money to where like they could just be a job that I had. And, being able to share with them when I started to, and to say like, hey, like, I kind of hope this is the last job I have. To be honest, like, I want to learn from you and do great here. And I want to learn how to grow and make enough money someday to be able to just make software on my own. And he was like, heck yeah, man, let's do that. And that's the really fun thing, is like, we see a lot of what works on the App Store and what people do. And you can pick up those things and apply it to your own work and try and, get in growth mode a little bit more. And, when we talk about the indie stuff, I think that's the biggest theme for me this last year too, is I kind of thought a lot less indie and more of just like, how do I make this make money? Like, how do I make things grow and become profitable enough for me to take them to that next level? And you see it all the time at RevenueCat. You see it all the time at Superwall. All of these companies that are just, doing insane amounts of money on apps that you would never, ever guess. And some that you would. Some are very obvious. But it's so interesting to look at that data and, kind of learn from it and see the trends and what's working and what doesn't, because it changes all the time.
So let's move on to that. We've talked enough about being developer advocates now. Let's get to what the people really want to hear about,
give them the good stuff,
which is the indie apps. So last year we talked about, you had recently, I think, launched Elite Hoops. So it's been a little over a year since that's been out. How's that going for you? First, as my job as host here, remind the people what Elite Hoops is, and then tell us how it's been going.
Yeah, it's so what it started at is a way to quickly share like plays, concepts, defense, whatever, for your basketball team. So I used ReplayKit to do screen recording with audio on like your iPhone, iPad, and it works on Mac too. And the idea was like, there's this whiteboard just like you would have in real life, but if you could record it and send it to your team, you could explain things a lot quicker. So Of course, I love basketball. My son's played year round since was 4. It's like a huge part of our family. We love watching basketball every night.
What's your email address again?
Oh, this is a good inside joke. That
you
I
don't
think
have to say the numbers, so nobody will guess it.
Everybody in on. So I've had the same email since no joke 4th grade. B-ball, the number 4, not 4 life, the word 4 life, and then like a few numbers at the end that were like my favorite basketball numbers. And like I've always had it, and I joke about this all the time. Like I filled out mortgage applications with that, like big boy jobs, like Social Security. And
anytime
so, like,
there's like
it's the worst.
Something where it's like, hey, what's everybody's email? And you get Charlie M. Chapman at
then I'm like
gmail.com, or you get person's name at me or whatever, and then you always see b-ball for life numbers coming from Jordan.
I think I had I was doing a credit check or something, when we bought our last car. And I'm like, all right, Mr. Morgan, just need your social. All right, now what's a good email for you? I'm like, b-ball for life.
Have you never have you created a more professional sounding one?
I did. I have the_Morgan_fam now. So I've been using that more, but I just have 20 whatever years of using that email address.
That's amazing.
The shame wears off as the years go on. I don't even care anymore. I'm just yep, here it is. Oh man. So
now it's part of your personal brand.
Yeah. So we love basketball. So the app was natural for me because I love, being in that area. But it's kind of grown since then. So and then it kind of goes back to what I was foreshadowing before about kind of learning from the companies that are doing, the App Store well. And my thing with Elite Hoops is I wasn't going to think of it so much as an indie app, where I really wanted to get the press coverage or, the App Store feature, which to be clear, I would absolutely love those things. I still try for them. But I had a huge emphasis on those as growth levers before. And I kind of got to the point where it's I'm just going to try and make my own luck with this thing. So in a blog post I just put up last night, actually, about a big feature I just shipped. It's this whole practice planner suite where you can create drills, you can make practice plans, and then you can run them interactively on your phone, kind of like how Instagram stories goes through your stories, or you could just print it out.
Yeah.
And that was the first time where I really I talked to a bunch of coaches. I know several personally from just, being involved with basketball so long. My neighbor's a college coach. I looked through a lot of my data. I looked through a lot of the feedback to kind of arrive at that decision to do that. Whereas before, I just kind of made what sounded interesting and fun to me. And so I kind of learned that lesson over the course of so many years. And I don't know why it took so long to learn the lesson of build what people actually need. And that sounds so incredibly obvious. But when you sit at your computer and you've been at work all day, or you've been a dad all day, and you have this little nugget of time, going through feedback isn't really fun. You just want to build something that gets that creativity, that expression out, or that new API that you want to use. Your mind doesn't go there.
I think there's a lot of advice online that is people saying, build what you love. The best apps are the ones made by people
solve
who
their
love
own
that
problem
thing.
That has the passion in it.
Yeah, solve your own problem. And I don't think that's wrong.
Same.
There's a lot of great examples of apps, because I do think you're generally, especially if you don't have a strong sort of product sense
which
mentality,
I've never had, to be clear.
Yeah, then building something for yourself is way easier. You are a product expert in that field. You know yourself really well. You don't have to figure that out. So in a lot of ways, it's a lot easier, but it's not strategic in terms of targeting an audience of any sort of size or potential customer base of any sort of size. And so, some of the best apps I have seen in terms of performance are people, whenever I talk to them, they kind of sheepishly are like, yeah, I don't actually even really use it myself.
Yep.
They sort of accidentally ended up into it, or they made it for themselves when they were in college, but they're way out of that. They're not in that stage of life anymore, but they're still building excellent software for that group of people. And I think that's just as valid. Sometimes it's even beneficial to be a little bit outside of it, because you're not building something particular to you. You're a lot more open to actually targeting it towards the market.
Yeah. No, that's completely true. And it's just at the end of the day, people are going to pay for something that really solves their problem. And I know everyone's heard that a million times. It's on every product podcast. It's on every product blog post. like what, I don't know why it just never went through my head, you know? Again, I think we're in a very specific niche of people that love making software on their own, to where like your creative energy is kind of trashed by the time you have time to actually work on this stuff, you know? So it got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to be ruthless about this. Like, if I can't make this make money, I'm not going to work on it. And now it's, when you look at it as more of a product and less in an indie app, that's been the shift that I personally needed to kind of grow it and to make it better. And, you know, I bootstrap all of it. And it's an interesting time to be talking about it, actually, because I think in the group chat the other day, I was like, hey, you know, that was my best day on Elite Hoops, like $645 in one day, something like that. But since then, it's kept that pace, like within a few $100s every day. And it's been so exciting to see like the momentum actually really start to pick up. And one shift that I made is like, before, if I had any kind of side project income, you know, it was just that, like, you know, I'll use it for vacation, you know, just some nice to have stuff. You know, it's not that much money, but it's nice to have that little extra income.
You don't just dump it into an account for fear of the tax man for years like I did.
Charlie has $6 trillion saved up for anyone listening. And I have been like the YOLO
I'm too scared
guy.
to spend any of it, but $6 trillion, it's all under a mattress in my house.
But what I've done with a lot of the money that I'm making with Elite Hoops is I'm pouring it right back into the product. So, for example, I started with $30 of Apple search ads when it first launched. And my little logic was like, if I just get one conversion, like baby steps, if I can just get one person to convert for $45, then, I mean, yeah, you got to take taxes, all that stuff away. But like, at least I come out on top. So like I started there and I've just slowly scaled up as the years gone on, to where now I spend $160 in advertising every single day just on autopilot. And then I've seen the revenue go up to like 500 or 600. And so like at the turn of the year, I'll look at it again and be like, all right, so should I up this to 200 to 300? And then if the revenue scales with it, then I'll just keep going until it doesn't work.
But that only works if your lifetime value per customer that you're acquiring through those is lower than or is higher than whatever the cost of that ad was, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't really look at charts very much. I look at this is where my product knowledge goes down the window. I look at MRR and like I love looking at what I make each day. So that's the way I've looked at it. You know, as long as I get the conversion a day, you know, then I'll
yeah. But
say
the thing is, what you don't know is if you turn those off, would your revenue go down more or less than the amount you're spending?
For sure. And that's where you really have to experiment. So I did that, and I just kept a simple Excel spreadsheet, and I think I divided it up into like 4 things. This was like 4 months ago. And the slots were just like organic, you know, no Apple search ads, no Meta ads, nothing. Just Apple search ads, just Meta ads, just an Instagram boosted post. And I think that's all I tried. And organic
and
was,
like you'd run it for a week or something? Like what
I
is
think I
that?
did 2 weeks for each one. So it took like a couple months.
Okay.
Excuse me.
But they were over different periods of time?
Yeah, I didn't run them at the same time. So I just did like all organic, no advertising for like 2 weeks. Then I just did like, because I don't really have like great tracking in there. Like I don't even use the Facebook SDK still. So it's just like, I can just kind of see what
that's where the
is.
Apple Search Ads one is better.
Yes, very, very much so. It's super helpful to kind of look at those things.
Because there you can actually
Get the
figure out what... Right. Because ultimately, I think that's what you have to do if you want to... I mean, if your goal is just to grow your audience or your user base, then... And you don't care if you're making money or losing money, then yeah, you can just like pour money into all these things. But if you want it to be profitable, then you kind of need to be able to figure out what is the actual lifetime value I'm getting out of the customers coming from that ad, right?
Yeah, and can you only really know LTV after like you've been out on the App Store for a year and kind of seen your churn rate and kind of how people are sticking around? Because I only recently hit that, like, I don't know, what was it? Late October, I think, is when that 1 year mark hit for me.
I mean, I'm certainly not an expert at this, but I think the way most people look at this is they'll look at the LTV over a period of like 30 days or 90 days. And so really what that tells you is, like, if you have an annual plan, you're, like you said, it was like $50 a year or whatever, then you get $50 immediately. It doesn't matter if they churn after that or not. If you have monthly, I think that's where people maybe look at the 90-day more than 30 days.
More, yeah.
But the reason for that is, unless you're like, you have a bunch of capital because you're like VC funded or something, what you really need to know is, am I getting the money back that I put into the machine within this set period of time? Otherwise, you can't keep putting money in the machine because you run out.
Yeah, totally.
Before you even get that back. And so I think that's what most people are looking at is 30 day or 90 days.
And that's why, like,
which is, if you're using Apple search ads, I can only speak for RevenueCat. I promise this isn't a shill, but like, we have a like LTV chart that you can look at and just see what those are.
Oh no, I've used it. Elite Hoops launched with RevenueCat. You know, I launched that before I started at Superwall, and yeah, no, I used that chart because we talked about this a long time ago. I forgot when, but like, you were showing me how to use the
probably.
chart to kind of, I think, look at this exact thing, you know, to figure out LTV. And for a while, Apple search ads were just killer for me. But then I had a competitor come out and I guess just kind of outbid me on all of those. And then it didn't work. So I've had this journey of like, Apple search ads were like the money magic machine, and then they weren't. And then I kind of figured out meta ads a little bit more and like kind of researched those pretty heavily. I tried a bunch of different creatives. Really thought about like, if I was just kind of swiping through Instagram or Facebook, like what would speak to me? What would make me actually want to install this app? And so, you know, I really kind of honed in on messaging and little tiny things. And I think I heard this on the Sub Club podcast when someone was on, I forget their name, specializing in meta ads. And they were talking about like the audience filters. Like, you can say you want to target, you know, this age range. And he basically said something to the effect of like, the lower age range may be on by default, but like those ads are really cheap to serve up to people on Facebook's or Meta's network, but they don't convert particularly well. And I was like, man, I should look at that, because most basketball coaches, and there are a ton of like youth trainers that start in like their lower 20s, but like teenagers aren't going to pay for Elite Hoops. And so like, I remember when I popped it on to I think 25 plus, it had like an immediate effect of like more, you know, just better performance, you know, and this is where I need my tracking better. But, you know, for my purposes, just looking at the big picture and kind of knowing how things perform, like I've been able to get a pretty good idea of where it stands. But like, you know, conversions are better. The metrics on Facebook's ad dashboard were a little bit better. And it made sense to me. It's like, oh man, maybe I was like serving all these ads to teenagers who have no, you know, they're interested in basketball, but they're not going to pay $45 for an app. So you learn like little things like that along the way.
That's targeted towards coaches.
100%. And I'm a big believer in kind of bootstrapping the process yourself, because like when you're spending the money that Apple puts into your account, like you feel it differently. You know, it's not like you're playing with your own money. So like if it doesn't work, like then it doesn't work, you know? So, but again, it kind of goes back to thinking of it as like less an indie app and more of like something that I actually want to grow. So, but yeah, all of this rambling to say it's definitely been my most financially successful app for sure. Especially this last week. So that big feature launched last Tuesday, a week ago tomorrow. And I'm really interested to see how conversions are starting tomorrow, because that's when I popped on $100 extra a day. Because before that feature launched, I was doing $60 a day. And then I was like, well, hey, let's just see what happens. So did a new ad set.
So where did that come from then?
The 100, like the idea behind it, or the number, or what part of it?
Well, hold on. Let me re-ask that then. What is when you said the $100 a day? I thought you were meaning that in revenue. You're saying in your price?
Okay, so the revenue since, you know, from about 7-8 days ago, it's anywhere from 300 to 600 that it makes a day. And I had been spending $60 a day in ads, 30 on Apple search ads, 30 in Meta. But when I launched that huge new feature, ad spend. So 60 on ad spend a day. When I launched that big, huge feature last Tuesday, I did a new ad set and added $100 a day just for that ad set. So that puts me up to 160. So 130 on Meta and 30 on Apple search ads.
And And you
yeah, we'll see how
saw
it
a
goes.
jump in revenue then after that.
You know, the jump in revenue has been there since before I started that $100 additionally on there. And I think
Oh, weird.
basketball
You don't know
season-
where that came
well,
from?
basketball season's in full swing, so that's definitely the biggest.
Yeah,
That's the
that makes
biggest
sense.
factor. So, like, I'm thinking if I'm in basketball season and things are working, then I'm going to try and double down and see like if this additional $100 really like moves the needle tangibly for me. And we can do an update a year from now to see how it went, I guess, next year.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've talked about it some before, and certainly lots of people on the show, we've talked about it, where it's like there's some apps where you can play the traditional marketing game of, around iOS releases and go, all the different people in the tech press. And, but those are like productivity apps or apps that are general public apps that you can sort of leverage the fact that you're part of the developer
Where
community
almost
and
anybody
iOS
is the
or
demographic
Apple enthusiast
in a way,
community. Yeah. Whereas, an app like Elite Hoops is very much not that. So like you're probably, unless you got like an Apple feature where they push it to such a wide audience that some percentage of them will be interested customers. For the most part, a 9-to-5 article is probably not going to do a whole lot for you compared to, something on Instagram, like an influencer in the basketball world or whatever. Not even basketball world, but coaching world.
And funny you mention that because I'm trying influencer marketing next year too. That exact idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's something I'm really interested in. Not necessarily so much for me, because I don't know how much that's going to move the needle on like white noise apps. But certainly with a lot of people I talk to for my job, there's a lot of apps where it sounds like that is the best way to get to your customers is to like find somebody who's a influencer in that arena who has a big audience, and do some sort of deal with them. Whether that's like an influencer campaign where they get a cut, a sale, like an affiliate kind of program, or just ads. But it's not something I've spent a lot of time personally messing with. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes.
And we'll talk about it for sure, because so I keep saying this big new feature. I think I said it earlier in the show. It's a practice planner, but it can also be used for like individual workouts. And that's what I use it for a lot. So me and my oldest son, Bennett, like we do little dribble drills in the garage in the morning, and like we put like his workouts in for each morning in there. So like we use it ourselves. And I was like, man, this would be great. Like that's a great story to tell for some basketball trainer out there. Like, hey, I got it set up with Elite Hoops. I start the workout on my phone. I can follow along interactively. So I think it could really work, but I think that's going to be my biggest expense. So I'm going to ease in really slowly, because I'm sure they charge, not a cheap amount for those things. But I love trying those things. And I don't know, growing a product is something that the process of it is actually really fun for me. And I didn't expect that. Like I love engineering. I love design, like making the practice planner. It turned out really pretty in my opinion. Like there are sometimes when I do something, I'm like, man, I really like how this turned out. And there are some things most of the time where I'm like, this is good enough. Like when Elite Hoops shipped, like it was good enough. But like the practice planner, I feel is more of like, man, that feels like a Porsche. Like this looks really good. And probably because I used so much UX from Shortcuts and the Photos app. So, but I think it's something that's easy to market. Like the story of why you need it and how it can help you is really easy to come up with.
Yeah.
But it's weird because like I'm at that point where I'm really pinching myself, because like even when I sent you that text like a week ago, like, man, it made like 600 whatever. That's new for me. Like I haven't had a product do that. And then each morning when I keep waking up, I'm kind of like, all right, is the fun over? Like, is this the day where I wake up and there's like no
that's why I was interested in figuring out where that's coming from. Because it's got to be something. Like, is your ASO improved?
So that's a good one to check, because I changed it up when I did the release last Tuesday, because there was nothing about practice planning in there before, because it was like all about sharing your plays. Now it's like you can share your plays, you can run your practices, you can save your drills.
Yeah.
And that's a big one, because a lot of coaches they'll look on TikTok, they'll look on Instagram, they all follow their favorite trainers, and they're always posting drills. That's their main form of content. And coaches save them everywhere, like on notes, clipboards, favorites, collections on Instagram. And so I gave them like one spot to save all of it. And I think one reason why it's going to, because the trial's 1 week. So I was going to say like maybe since it released last Tuesday, that's why things were better. But those conversions are coming from before I even shipped that. But I think it's a mix of basketball starting. And I think the people that are there now, like, pinch me, I'm about to sound like such a product manager, but the practice planner is really going to make it, here we go, sticky. It's going to make the product a lot more sticky, because when you've built up all your practices and you've saved all your drills, like you're less likely to churn out of it because you've built up so much of your personal workflow in that. And so, I'll text you, I guess, if trials started, if I released this last Tuesday, then my trials would start converting Wednesday, right? I'm really stupid with how all this works. Like a 1 week trial.
Yeah, assuming they all have trials.
Yeah. So I'll let you know Wednesday how it goes. But like I said, I said this in a blog post I just put out too. Like for the first time in my indie career, it feels like I could actually grow it into something that I, by my own personal metrics, have wanted to grow it to. And I just kind of attribute that to just being around long enough and doing the wrong things to meet that goal. Not the wrong things for everybody. Like if you just want to have, like you said, your passion project, I've been there, then do it. But like, that's not what I've been wanting to do lately. Like I've wanted to make something that could solve a problem and make money.
I think that's a big part of it though, right?
Yeah.
It's not just you've done the reps and now you know. It's like you started this with a different goal than Spin Stacks or your other projects. The goal was not to make, this is going to sound bad, but it wasn't to make something you're proud of.
Yeah, it was something to make a viable product.
To show other iOS developers, look at the craft I've put into this. It was to deliver a product that people find valuable enough to pay for. Mm-hmm. And those are different. Like you're not making an art piece, you're making
a business.
A valuable product for people who do not care about iOS or Swift or animations or any of that stuff. They're looking for something to make their lives a little better.
It's so true. And I think where we do have a big advantage, especially people like you and me, is we've spent so many years trying to make that really nice app that we can put just enough of that into the business oriented, project. And it shows, because a lot of the feedback that I get through emails is like, this just is nicer than the other apps. Which is great. And so like you can kind of, it becomes a competitive advantage to where like you learn. I think the growth for me is like, I know enough design and UX to make it nice and feel great now, but like that can't be the only thing I'm thinking about. And that used to be like the only thing I thought about. And then you'll end up with a nice looking product that maybe just doesn't solve real problems. And so when you can kind of mash them together, it gets you into this nice flow. Because basketball software has been like such a boring area. Like it's really uninspiring, So it's like that little animation that takes you 2 seconds to put in, but like, because you've perfected it or spent too much time or learned the hard lessons before. And now that you can carry it through with your experience and doing it in a way to where it's additive, but it's not like your week's focus. That's where it kind of starts to mesh a little bit better.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that as in the flourish in craftsmanship doesn't have value.
No, that's what you said. You said everyone that does that is a waste of time. Come on, I can't change it now. No,
it is
you're
funny,
so right, though. It's true.
I think us both doing this dev advocate thing, not even dev advocate thing, but us working for companies that provide tools for developers that are trying to make money. I at least, I'm sure you feel this too, am way more exposed to the sort of indie hacker community, which is different than the iOS developer community, even though they're both building usually iOS apps. But I think it's over provisioned in the other direction, where it's like only value, like distill something down purely to just its like value to the user, build that in the most minimal way possible, and then ship it, and then iterate on that maybe. But there's almost like a lack of time spent on quality. And a lot of those feel like they become flash in the pan products. Like
high
they might
revenue for like a few months and then, once the care,
it collapses.
Yeah, that can happen for sure.
And so I think obviously it matters there. I think the other thing is, craftsmanship, I think it conveys value, even if it isn't the value in itself. I think this is why, in the 2000s, late 2000s, everybody's website had, high resolution stock photography, and you go to a site that has that and it looks nice. Like, this is a professional, not a fly by night operation that's going to steal my credit card history. And then all these stock photo tools, and free ones like Unsplash or whatever, those started coming out. And all of a sudden, the cost to getting something that has a bunch of royalty free, high quality photos in it was like almost zero. And now every fly by night operation can have those and look just as professional. And then you saw this total switch into like minimalism, or do you remember like the flathead? Yeah, is that what it's called? Or fathead, whatever that, people. The weird shaped people.
Yeah. We did a rebrand at Buffer with that.
And I think, and like people in the design community rolled their eyes a lot at it. But I think the reason for that is it conveyed value. If you don't care about tech and you open a site that has a stock photo of a person at a wooden coffee table talking with a pencil in their hand, you're kind of like, is this real or is this a scam? Whereas if you went to one that's all white and it had that generic, but like clearly it was made by an artist or something, because you couldn't just go to Unsplash and get stuff that custom fit your website. It was like this little detail that subtly conveyed that this is a valuable thing. And then you have like Stripe, whenever they did their landing page with the animated gradients.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know what that conveyed? It conveyed value. Did it matter? No, but you went to it and you're like, this is not just some fly by night operation thing. It was also fun and maybe helped them attract engineers or something. So I do think when you open up an app and the welcome screen has some fluid animations and it's clearly not janky, immediately that conveys like, this is a serious app. Mm-hmm. This isn't just another AI wrapper that somebody made in like 2 hours with some cross-platform tool. Not that cross-platform tools are bad, but like there was time spent on this, and that's what I should expect going through with that app. So I do think that there's absolutely real value and perceived value in all of those craftsmanship things.
There is. I think the best way to put it is like measured craftsmanship is like a competitive advantage now. And I say measured because like you can't go in the direction that I used to go with SpinStack and just make it all about making a pretty app. But it's like, if you can take a problem and solve it and add your dash of care to it, like it really stands out. And anything can change tomorrow. But like if you download any of the basketball coaching apps on the App Store right now and put them next to Elite Hoops, like it's night and day. I mean, because it's just like they're not really cared for at all. And I think I'm reaping all of those lessons I learned over the years and putting that into like a positive motion now, to where it's like I don't lose sight of what's going to make it grow. And now that I know just enough, how much time and how much effort is just enough to make it feel really good and really nice, but not overdo it and lose sight of the goal, is that happy middle ground that I had to really find. And it was a struggle. And there's a quote that you said last year that really actually stuck with me. I still remember it. We were talking about how I have this membership card in the settings. And like, if you're subscribed, it's like this, it looks like a fake like ID card, like renews at, your plan, your ID, that kind of stuff. It like says Elite Hoops Coaching Club, and it just looks like this nice ID card. But like I had this little async issue to where like it would flash in few instances. Like if you open the app up to settings, I'd get the response down. I'd see that they're pro. The Swift UI, view would re-render and be like, oh, they're on pro. So switch out the view. And like before, you were mentioning how like if that was SpinStack, like it'd just be a no-go. I would spend as much time as it took to solve that problem before I shipped. Whereas this time, I'm just like, you know what? That's I'm gonna live with it, and I'll fix it later or I won't fix it later. But it's not gonna move the needle on like if someone subscribes or not. But it's like something that I'll definitely notice. And so it's about learning those things as an indie developer. what is truly worth spending your time on. And again, when you're in our cohort of indie devs where you're married and you have kids, time is so limited. So it's like you have no choice but to be laser focused to actually make it worth your while, because you're going to be in a spot where you're tired or exhausted at the end of the night, but you still kind of want to get something done. Or you're in the morning and you're full of that creative energy and like maybe all you want to do is work on making something look really cool and splashy, but it's like, I got to be realistic. Like I got 1 hour before I clock into my job. Like, what can I do?
Yeah.
What's nice enough? And I think that's the biggest lesson that I would kind of give to people in a similar spot. And when I hit that conference circuit, like the legend of Charlie Chapman, who's at every single one, I'll give a similar talk or something like that. But it's just like, you don't learn it unless you go through it. And that's how it was for me. And some people have gotten that right away and been successful a lot quicker. But I just like doing things the hard way and taking several years to learn simple things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm kind of going back and forth on this now as I say it out loud. But I do think there's an interesting reality especially with side projects. Maybe this applies if you're doing this full-time indie as well, where time isn't finite. Like it is literally, but like it feels like, especially as, like you said, as parents who are doing this on the side, like I have only a sliver of time that I can really spend on this stuff. But the reality is the time I spend on this stuff is not, add up the amount of extra hours I have and put them together. It's really like in these big waves of when I'm really excited and passionate about what I'm working on and when I'm not. And something I've definitely learned about myself is I can't force it the way that I used to. Like you said, sometimes you're just tired or you've spent yourself. But what I can do is find interesting things to like jumpstart my productive energy, if that makes sense. So like, I guess I haven't talked about it here because I haven't been doing the show frequently enough, but I have another app. I have a Mac app actually I've been working on called Screen Frames. That's the name currently now anyway. I still haven't released it. I built it really fast with the idea that I was going to try and release it fast following Yordi's like 222 method of like delivering something really, really fast. And I did the first 2.2s, and then the last part where you actually ship it to the App Store. It's not there, but it is on test flight. Yeah. I did ship it quickly to people for free. And it just, for context, it's like a screenshot for adding like frames, Apple device frames around your screenshots. But it's like a very, very Mac appy version of that. Anyway, doing that, I was super excited about it and got really into it. But the reason that I haven't shipped it is not because I didn't follow through. It's because it actually got my creative juices going enough to do things that I've been trying to do in Dark Noise for forever. But like this job for me doesn't sound like it's done it to you as much, but every time I switch jobs, it's usually, I have a bunch of milestones. Like usually I say, I feel completely worthless for the first 6 months, and I have to be okay with feeling worthless because I'll start feeling really bad about myself. 6 months is when I start to feel like I'm adding value to the team for the first time. A year is when I feel like I'm actually worth maybe what they're paying me, hopefully by that point. But another one of those milestones is for the first year that I'm working anywhere, and I've switched jobs enough times that I can kind of measure this, all my side hustles really take a big hit. Whether that was motion graphics back in the day, side project, Dark Noise, whatever. And with this job, it's actually taken a longer hit because I also career switched. I'm doing something different than I ever did before. And I'm in the last 3 or 4 months feeling like I'm getting that side hustle itch again, really. And part of what got that really going for me was doing this totally different project. I stopped trying to force myself to do things. And so I do think thinking of time in that way is useful. You have more time than you're actually going to spend on things, almost definitionally. And at least for me, the only way I can sit there and work on side coding stuff while me and my wife watch a TV show after we put the kids down, the only way that I ever spend that time doing side hustle stuff is if I get excited about it again. And sometimes the side project work I need to do isn't fun. And I think switching to something else, even if it's not the most valuable, is sometimes the most valuable thing, because it like reignites me working on it.
Oh, there's a whole topic there that is so true about, and I think this is why we are natural fits for a developer advocate role. Like working with new technology or a new thing is so gratifying to me. Like it makes me feel like I just graduated college again. And I've been lucky enough to have this happen several times this year. So like one was I actually wanted to do like a I think Tyler calls it a side project, like a side project for your side project. And like my idea of that for Elite Hoops was like, I wish I could make this online generator that would give you a practice plan. Like you would say what age you had for your team, you would say how much time you had, you'd pick some focus areas, and it would spit out a practice plan. And like, I have not done web dev. It's never been my forte. Like I've always built my own websites using Jekyll, deploying with Netlify. So like I am hands-on, like in terms of like making your own website. Like, yes, I coded all of them, but like never like web apps.
Or now you asked what's it called to code it for you?
I was going to say, and I used Cursor to build that. So I ended up building that out. Yeah. And I had so much fun. Like that might have been the most fun I've had like programming in a long time. Cause like there was this like segment of like software engineering that was intimidating to me, like web development. Like I don't know how to like call ChatGPT's API. I mean, I know there's a JavaScript client for it, but it's like, how do I hide my API key? You know, like how do I set up the environment variables? You know, all those things that I kind of just knew I could learn, but didn't want to spend again that limited time on. And so like that's where I feel like things like the AI stuff as like a companion have really like almost uncovered my love for software engineering all over. Because when I built that, I felt so like it was gratifying. And when I deployed it, and like anyone can go to Elite Hoops right now and do it, Elite Hoops app, you click tools at the top. And I was like, I can't believe I made that. Like, you know, it like does the API call.
It is. It's like the first time you build an app and you touch your software.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's something weird about that feeling.
The practices it generates with a unique URL and stores them in Netlify blobs, and you can like share the link and it'll retrieve them, and you know all this stuff. And I've been tweeting about this too. There's a NCAA scoring app that I'm gonna end up shipping, and that was another thing where I'm like, this just feels so fun. And like, you know, you gotta balance what you have to do with like what you want to do. I feel like otherwise, because if you always do what you need to do, like you get in the doldrums, and that's where things kind of sink and stop. So like you're more productive, I think, with the indie stuff when you let yourself just kind of get that creative outlet and just work on something that's just fun. Because you get it out of your system a little bit, you get that boost. And then the boring stuff that you kind of have to do, you get a little bit more juice to power through it. And that's kind of why
do you find you get momentum? Like you can carry that momentum into the normal app?
Yeah, because like I immediately started on the practice planner when I realized I wanted to do it. And it just seemed like this boil the ocean problem. So I actually paused it and I made like the free version of the one on the website that I was just talking about. And like then I transitioned back into the practice planner, and that was a really good exercise for me because one, I learned what an MVP of it looks like, and I learned that I could just give it away for free. And two, like I did that creative itch. I did a whole new like web technology, all that stuff that I've never used, like the serverless functions, all those things. And then I slid into the practice planner with like a new kind of reinvigorated focus on it and was able to do it. And then with like the NCAA app that I'm doing, I deployed my own API, which I've never done. And, you know, I was joking around, like, I feel like such a programmer now. Like, you know, I have my own API.
You're doing DevOps.
Yeah, DevOps. You know, after being in the industry for whatever, 15, 16 years, I finally feel like a programmer now. But like, that was so fun. Like, because I remember like, I was asking everybody like, hey, like, what should I use? Like, you know, how much do you think this stuff costs? And, you know, do I use DigitalOcean, AWS? Which, by the way, everyone said don't use AWS, every single person. So, you know, I chatted with a few more of my buddies to like kind of figure out what to do, and ended up using the service called Render, where you could use it like I use Netlify with my website. So you point it to Git, a repository, and anytime you push to main, it deploys your API. And so,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like stuff like that, like you gotta have fun doing this stuff. And one point I was making, I don't know if I tied it back, is like, that's why I think developer advocacy has been so much fun and will be so much fun, is you kind of can make it your job to do those things. Like if I'm not feeling another iOS article this week, it's like, man, I'll just learn something new about Flutter that I don't know. And then I can turn that into an article. Like, even if it's something basic, like how do I do subscriptions in Flutter? Like, that's still a valuable piece of content in my role that I could provide. And you got to switch it up, keep your brain working. And that's the stuff that's always been fun about software engineering.
Oh, yeah. So we're like getting close on time, but it wouldn't be an episode or a Christmas special with Jordan if we didn't talk about the Best in Class book series. Obviously, you've been done with it. You were done with it last year.
Yep.
But have you made updates? Like, what's the latest on the book series?
I can even
and explain again what it is.
I can pull up the hashtag numbers too. Yeah. So the Best in Class book series was a fantastic way to drive myself to burnout and desperation by writing a book for 2.5 years. It's what it ended up being. No, it was, so the elevator pitch was, I had an app called SpinStack years ago that I had sold to a company to help, pay. We were building a house during COVID, costs shot up. So that's the whole thing. It's in the back catalog of our Christmas specials, I'm sure, if you want the full story on that. But I always wanted to write a book series. And so I split it up into 5 books because one book would be much more sane and reasonable. And I released updates every 2 weeks on the books. I think it was APIs, design, accessibility, user experience, and just kind of like I don't know where this goes, so it goes in this book. And so, yeah, it took 2.5 years to write. And my goal for that going forward is, now I'm in a healthier place where I have been, to where I've had to grind on it all the time. And what I want to do with it going forward is one hashtag major update when a new iOS version comes out, and one minor update throughout the year. And so over the past year, I've done the one minor update, and I'm starting work on the iOS 18 update in January. And it's fun because, like, when I leave it alone, I'm happy to come back to it. And I found a really good natural flow for it. Now that it's been out and done for over a year, I found that like a minor and a major is more than enough. Like, no one has ever, not once, knock on wood, been like, hey, I wish you would update this more. Like, that's great.
And it gives you a deadline, which is probably important to keeping up with it.
Exactly. But as far as sales, it doesn't sell hardly. I mean, if I had a graph, chart that I could make real quick, like, it would go down year over year. I think in 2024, it's made, let me get my good old Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, it's made $4,000. So that's like by far the lowest that it's ever made. So like a few $100.
But I mean, it's still making enough money to be worth updating it.
And it's like kind of like one of my babies, It's like, I can't believe that I wrote because like when I select all of it in like the word processing tool, I'm like, wow, I wrote like 1,200 pages over this stuff. And again, go back to the previous episodes. It was more than worth my time. I mean, I think lifetime it's made like $160,000. So like, it was more than I ever could have dreamed of making. But it's one of the things now where it's like, I know where it fits into my life, and I come to it a few times a year, and I've put in enough work with it to where it's in a position to be able to do that.
As your friend, I'm just so glad that it's out of your life now.
Oh, dude.
Especially towards the end, it was just
it was really hard.
It was definitely I mean, there's a cliche about the pained artist trying to finish a book, or an author trying to finish the book, and it was like, man, this is real. Like,
it's crazy.
That was just so much work.
I'm glad that I did it. I don't see myself ever doing anything like that again. But it is crazy to think back. Like, I am really proud of it now that it's done. Like, wow, I wrote like on every facet of iOS that I kind of know. But the hilarious part about all this is, like, even coming to it a few times a year, if I would just spend like a day to make the release process easier, because it takes forever. It's really hard to release.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I would probably like update it every other month with stuff. Like, because I have things all the time that I add in there. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I didn't know about this. Like, in iOS 18.2, for example, there's a new initializer on image to where you can give it a UT type and like a file URL, and it'll just make the image for you from that. And I'm like, that's fun. That's interesting. Like, I just kind of happened to find that. And that's the stuff that I love putting in the book. But when it takes forever to release it and like update the covers and get it all uploaded. It's just like, it's such a slog that like I have to like wake up that morning and be like, oh, all right, like I'm going to get this out now. So one of these days, maybe when we chat next year, if I just make it easy to release, like it would have a ton of updates throughout the year. But since that's not
the reality though is
yeah.
it's probably better from a marketing perspective to have the twice a year hits.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's to the point where like I wake up and like I'm pleasantly surprised if it sold a copy. I'm like, oh, cool, someone bought it. You know, it happens like 3 or 4 times a month, probably. I think is what it averages out to. But before it was, I mean, that was another fun memory. Like I will never forget like when I first like tweeted like, hey, this is ready, and just seeing like at the time I used Gumroad. I was like, oh my gosh, like I had never personally been through anything like that of making all that money in one day, you know.
I still remember being in the drive-through at Starbucks in like somewhere along I-44 and finally getting to catch up on my phone because it was that day.
Yeah.
And you were texting us updates and I'm like scrolling through our text chat and I'm like, oh my gosh, like Jordan's doing awesome.
Yeah, it was
that was a really cool day.
It was. And like, I'm so sentimental. I saved everything in day one. Like, you know, every kid's first day, like the other day, Remy, my middle child, had his first basketball practice. Like he decided he wanted to play basketball now. Like I put everything in there. And it has this handy widget, like, you know, in your journal X years ago. And anytime I see the day that like I shipped it and released it, I always read it. I always open it because it's fun to go back in that headspace. Because you know, when you go with something like SpinStack that's made like, I think at its very best, it made like 15,000 in a year to making a lot more than that. Like it kind of, you're just like, wow, it is possible to like do this somehow, you know, somewhere it just kind of all works. But yep, that's where it's at. And I imagine the update's going to be the same every time we do our famed Christmas special every year, is where it's like, yep, I do the minor and the major every year. And for this point, it's kind of for the love of the game. But luckily I love the game, so it'll keep getting updated.
There you go. That's awesome. All right. Well, I think we're reaching the end here. Launched will continue to live. Maybe going forward, it will just be this once a year. But I hope there will be much more launched in 2025 than there was in 2024.
Me too, man. It's a great show.
If you actually listen to this and also feel that way, let me know. I will use every one of your encouraging tweets, toots, skeets, whatever it is that we're doing now on the social networks as a point of encouragement to try and fuel me to get this thing back off the ground again.
Heck yeah, man.
And if not, you know, don't say anything, I guess. So, speaking of all of the social networks, we didn't even talk about.
I was going to say we can fill another B-roll.
We'll save it for next year. Yeah. But speaking of all that, where can people find you and all of the many things that you do on the internet?
You know, at this point, I'm just like telling them to go to my website. So Swiftjective-C, it's Swift and Objective-C crammed together, /about. Because there I list all the 59 social networks that we have to be a part of now. So they're all there.
And whatever one we're going to join tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, whatever new hotness there is, we'll be there. But yeah, my website's the best place to just find anything I'm up to.
Awesome. And if you want to keep up with the latest goings on Launched, it is also on all of the different places. LaunchedFM.com is the website where everything lives. We are on Blue Sky. We're on Twitter. We're on Mastodon. We're on Threads. I'm not on LinkedIn yet, but you know, if you want me to be on LinkedIn,
how are you going to share what you learned about B2B sales from your life experiences if you're not on LinkedIn?
Yeah, from the exactly. You know what? If enough people want me to be, I'll join. All right, that's the end of the show. Music's playing. I'm going to hit stop on the recording, and hopefully this thing actually recorded.